Hello, everybody. My name is Stephen D. Kelly. This is the Stephen D. Kelly Show. Welcome. We are Truth Cat Radio, www.truthcatradio.com. It's December 19th, 2024. First of all, I want to apologize for not being here last week, but sometimes I do have to go in the field, and there's the last thing I want to do is miss the show, but unfortunately disrupted. But I don't want to tell you because sometimes I have to stick my neck out a little bit further than I want to. Anyway, tonight's show I'm going to dedicate to Sean David Morton. I'm not going to be talking about Sean. I'm going to be talking about something else that I've been struggling with for a couple of weeks. But Sean died yesterday, the 18th, December 18th, 2024. If you know him, he had cancer. He was pretty nasty throat cancer. But anyway, he died, from what I understand, at his home in Mission Viejo with his wife, Melissa. I don't know if there's a funeral yet. I'm going to hopefully be able to attend and show my respects, assuming that they don't refuse me entry. I don't mean it like that, but hopefully I'll hear about that. If anybody does know anything about it, please let me know. And perhaps I'll make a little sub-recording where I talk about my experiences with him. But let's just say we were frenemies of sorts. We certainly communicated, but at the same time, we were kind of on opposite ends of the mission. Anyway, but suffice it to say, he was my colleague, and he died. And just like Jordan Maxwell, that's one less icon in the industry, and I don't really know who to consider is still left on that list. And I don't know that we have had any kind of new, real, well, let's just say, big names, reputable people when it comes to our industry. There's a lot of researchers and talkers, but there's no real legendary type experiencers, I suppose. At least for whatever it's worth, Sean was unique. But anyway, he's gone. Okay, so that being said, what I'm really planning on talking about tonight is my coming to terms with what happened in Syria and some of the opinions that I've had. Now last week when I was supposed to do a show, I have to tell you, I had a lot of words in my head, and I know even some of the stuff that I wanted to say, Rambo did not want me to say. Flat out was giving me saying, no, you're not going to do that. So maybe I needed to avoid it for that reason. But at this time, I was feeling a great deal of shame for this country. And I felt that at no other time was I more ashamed being part of this country because of our role and duplicity and the wickedness. It was a little bit much. I want to talk about my experiences with Syria since the nation is essentially dead. And I want to share some things with you, but one of the things that's kind of important is that one of my buddies from Syria got a hold of me. I reached out to him. There's others. There's at least 4 people that I know there. But I was able to reach him, and he's someone that I've communicated with and done a lot of episodes with in the past over the years during the whole conflict going on over there in Syria. Now, here's the thing. When I was doing episodes and interviews and appearances on Press TV and what have you, I was doing so in support of Assad and his government against the powers of, at that time it was Obama, the United States, the CIA, Mossad, the so-called ISIS, which we all know is a fabrication, as I so famously said all those years ago. But I'll tell you, I really cut my geopolitical teeth on the Syrian experience, what happened over there. It's hard for me to put this out there, but let's just say things have changed, obviously. Now, because Assad is gone, people are saying different things, and of course now they're saying, well, we're free now to say how horrible this guy was. My opinions have not changed. And so I have to be very careful because these people that I'm talking to, I don't even want to say their name right now. I have to really think about this because right now, anything that they say could enable this new regime. It could help to prop it up and justify it and make it look good. Even what I'm saying right now is dangerous because I have to worry that my friends are going to be connected to me, and if I don't toe the line on their behalf, bad things could happen. Now, it's very difficult for me to say anything and to even repeat some of the things that I've been told just recently because I know they reek of CIA, Mossad propaganda. So I'm very disappointed in that. The level of disappointment in all of this is kind of overwhelming, but I'll start with Assad and what my real feelings are about the guy, at least in light of everything that's happened to date, because of course I did have a certain amount of respect for the dude, even though I'm sure he's guilty of all sorts of heinous stuff. For the most part, that's not him. That was his father. He was just trying to run the country. Now, before I say anything, I'm just going to remind everybody that if you're going to run a Middle Eastern country of this nature, an Arab country especially, you have to be a strong man. You have to be a strong man. You're surrounded by snakes and vipers, not the least of which is Erdogan and Mossad, to a much lesser degree, perhaps, some of your other Gulf neighbors at one time or another. So you have to be tough. You have to control the control structure. Well, let's just say Sharia and the conquest of Islam is not a joke. In spite of how I feel about my Muslim buddies, I know that ultimately, from a militant standpoint, from a geopolitical standpoint, Islam is not just a religion, it's a conquest. You could say that about any religion, but where I come from, well, let's just put it this way. When you get involved with the CIA and stuff, it all goes out the window because they don't talk about flying saucers. But either way, back to Assad. Now, his recent letters and stuff that he's put out there basically say that he didn't abandon his post. He took up a position at Hymenin Russian Air Force Base right there in Latakia, and that was his final position before being evacuated. So he claims that he did not give up. 2 weeks ago or so when I talked about this, I told you that we know that the country was crippled and hollowed out by sanctions, and life was miserable, and you couldn't get the simplest thing, especially if it had something to do with medical or anything of Western in that nature, kind of like we're doing to Cuba still. But in a country like that, it was crippling. It was suffocating. We didn't let up. And to the average person, the average consumer, citizen of the country, it made life difficult. And that was the intention, but it still was not a good thing. And years and years and years of this did not help. And of course, there was corruption. One of the things that Bashar Assad did that apparently was not a good idea, for whatever reason, is when the war was over, he let go a lot of the commanders, the senior commanders of the various military units that were overseeing the previous destruction of ISIS, and he replaced them with people that he thought would be more loyal to him in a pinch. I don't know who advised him of this, but anyway, it turned out obviously those people were not loyal because they took the shekels, and when the enemy approached, they let them right through. They wait until they approached the front lines, and then they withdrew, and they withdrew, and they withdrew. I really have no idea of how many soldiers of the Syrian Arab Army wanted to fight, wanted to run, were told to disarm, were told to stand down. I don't know. But I do know that thousands upon thousands of them were seen running away, throwing down their arms. And I know that when the Iraqi militia tried to come to the rescue, they were bombed by the United States. Now, Lebanon, of course, and the Hezbollah, the people that helped them so much earlier, they, of course, were having their own issues with Israel. And then Iran, and the Iranian militias and helpers, they were having their issues because of Israel. So it was a perfect storm. But what really happened? What really happened is somehow the wife of Assad, I call her Rima. I know Rima is someone else, but Riza is it? She got cancer. She got breast cancer, and that, of course, was probably extremely traumatic for this man. This is a beautiful woman. He's a relatively young family, living life to its fullest, trying to be a leader, a responsible leader, but at the same time, his life was revolving around his family and his wife. When she battled the breast cancer, then she came down with leukemia. Now, me personally, I say that they gave her cancer. When I say they, I mean us, the Mossad, the Khazarian Rothschild Mafia, Intertel, NSA, spooks. And I'm thinking, if I had to use my intuition, that they did it probably with an article of clothing. My guess is that they had a bra from Paris, perhaps, with an underwire that was perhaps, I don't know, a little bit radioactive, perhaps. But she had some perfume. Or she had something. A vaccine, perhaps. A beauty product. I'm going with beauty product because I'm thinking she probably had fine taste, and much like the Israelis penetrated the Motorola's, they probably penetrated the boudoir, the First Lady of Syria, and gave her cancer. Pretty confident that that's probably how it got her. But anyway, obviously, if I was Bashar Assad and my wife was on the verge of death like that, I think I wouldn't give a shit about anything else. I think my motivation to put on a strong face and to not, let the misery take over, I think that would be kind of difficult. Do I hold it against him? No. Was it his fault? No. But if anything, this is a lesson in leadership. Now, I've always thought, contrary to what the West is teaching people, that Assad was not tough enough from my observations during the entire period of ISIS and what have you, where I was introduced to Syria up close through my associates, I always looked for signs of some sort of atrocities that he was involved in. Sure, I heard about people in prison probably getting tortured, this sort of thing. But again, this is the Middle East. You're dealing with enemies that chop your head off. You're dealing with enemies that steal your territory, stop your water, and take the high ground. Steal your oil. Steal your grain. Destroy your monuments. Desecrate your sanctuaries. Rape your women. Did I mention they cut your head off? Now, this is not America. This is not El Dorado County, although that's a pretty fucked up place. I will talk about that maybe a little bit, but not tonight perhaps. But yeah, Vern, fuck off. Anyway, I got him all over my ass right now and his IT hackers over there in El Dorado County. Let this be just another document. Turning my computer off at weird times. Yeah. You think you're slick. Anyway, back to Syria. Assad should have stepped down. There should have been a way to transfer power in such a way that it wouldn't be able to be manipulated by the Rosh al-Khazarian Mafia, the so-called West. You should have done something. When I look at the map, I see Syria and I see Iraq, and I think, wow, I know one is Assyria and one is Babylon, but if you combine those two territories together, you'd have access to the Mediterranean and the Red Sea. Pretty formidable chunk of real estate. But kind of like those guys should work together. Can you imagine? Poor Saddam. Anyway, seriously, guys, in this day of multipolar world and what have you, what we're getting is not a good thing. Who controls Syria now? Turkey. Turkey pulled this shit off. The United States. Erdogan thinks he's tough. I want to share something with you guys here. Let me get it real quick here. All right. I have a little shrine. Put this back. And on this shrine I have, I'm missing one of them, but I have a couple names. And I probably told you this before. This has probably come up, but there's two people that I'm honoring. And both of these people are related to the conflict in Syria, at least over the years. And when I say I've invested myself in this conflict, this is just sort of like an example. But here's these two names. The one is Khalid al-Assad. And this guy was the head of antiquities in Palmyra. And when ISIS rolled into town, they captured Palmyra more than once. It's the first time they did it. They got a hold of this guy because he was the expert on all the ancient treasure antiquities that Palmyra, if you know anything about the city, is full of. It's an extremely ancient city in the middle of nowhere, and it's filled with artifacts. Anyway, well, they tortured this guy so that he would help them to identify which artifacts were the most valuable, etc., and provide whatever information that they needed so that they could sell this stuff and ship it out wherever they shipped the stuff out. And of course, obviously, they destroyed massive amounts of these antiquities, but they used this guy to figure out where the money was. Anyway, when they were done with him, they cut his head off and they hung his body at the entrance to the town from the welcome sign out there. That's a guy that I think should be remembered. He's innocent. He was a scholar. His job was to share that culture. to know that culture. Well, there is another guy, and his name was Alexander Prokhorenko. I think he might have been a lieutenant or something. He was a young guy. He's a Russian dude, airborne, whatever. And he was part of the contingent of Russians that went into Syria to help eliminate ISIS, which they did very so successfully. But anyway, this guy, young man, whatever, wife, no children, is surrounded by ISIS, and he calls an airstrike on himself so that these guys could not capture him and desecrate his uniform, as he said. So I thought, he's like a hero. Obviously, he's a hero. I'm sure they're not going to talk about this guy in America, but over there in Russia, I'm pretty sure this guy's on the list of heroes. But he's on my little list of people that died in Syria that I wanted to remember after I thought that country had defeated that satanic Mossad CIA bullshit. It's kind of like the way it should be, right? You don't expect the graves to be desecrated. You don't expect everything to be destroyed and turned over. And now it's almost like, what a waste. What a waste. The country's not going to come back this time. There isn't going to be any charismatic leader that's going to kick these bastards out. It's already being carved up. It's already being destroyed. It's a corpse. A culture thousands of years old being stripped of its culture and destroyed now because of Rothschild, Khazarian Mafia, Western, whatever. Obviously, the Russians are pissed because, they devoted a lot of lives and treasure and blood to help defend the Syrians and to, again, destroy the threat of ISIS. Now, I might have said this a couple weeks ago, but we learn, we keep learning. I try to understand. I was just assuming that these guys, HTS, whatever they call themselves, ISIS 2.0, came out of Turkey. Now, I assume a lot of them probably did, but apparently not. Apparently they were in Idlib. And why was ISIS able to be in Idlib at all? Why? Because Assad was too weak. He was not tough enough. Why did he let them live at all? Why did he let them withdraw to Idlib? Because he wouldn't have, otherwise you'd have 1 million Turkish refugees in Turkey, kind of like they do now. Seriously, there's 1 million Syrian refugees in Turkey. You know what's going to happen? Erdogan's going to send them to Germany. Octoliba. Anyway, it's just beginning. But if you ask me, just like the Russians, at least the Russians used to be that way, just like the people of the Donbass used to be that way. As soon as the world community says, humanitarian crisis, you must stop killing the Mujahideen, the terrorists, were they? Moderate rebels. Stop, don't look. Anyway, bottom line is Assad should have wiped him out. Instead, he let him move into Idlib, and Turkey, who shouldn't have been in the country at all anyway, says, yeah, we're going to police this place, and you're not going to have to, because if your presence is in there, these guys are going to be all upset. So we'll do it for you, and we'll make sure that these guys turn in their guns and turn in their heavy weapons and don't regroup. But no, what do? They give them more guns, more heavy weapons. They allow them to regroup, and they infiltrate skilled fighters, terrorists from all over the world, including Ukraine. This is a NATO country. This is us. This is our guys. Now, sure, Erdogan did that for the glory of Greater Turkey, but at the same time, he did it in conjunction with the CIA and Israel. And all of a sudden, these forces come in there sweeping out. Where did they come from? Now, apparently, Iran warned Assad at least 3 months before the event that a major assault on Aleppo was coming out of Idlib. And he ignored it, and he didn't do anything about it. Probably because of his wife. He didn't give a shit anymore. Got a feeling maybe she lost her boobs, perhaps. Anyway, he didn't give a damn. So the other thing is that he didn't want to have anything to do with that bastard Erdogan, whose country is responsible for stealing all that land north of Latakia and then some, and for all their infiltration in order to attack the Kurds and all of everything else they've done. Assad didn't want to have anything to do with it. Now, of course, like I said, Iran and Russia and the other people that are involved all tried to get him to have a meeting, and he went away. He ignored it. He did everything he could to not be in the same room as Erdogan. And I don't say this gives Erdogan an excuse to topple Assad. But if Assad wasn't strong enough, and Assad hated that man so much, he should have come up with a different system. I don't know, maybe he should have sent in some assassins to kill a guy, perhaps. He should have had more balls. But the bottom line is, if his wife had cancer, and he could not rise above the needs of his family and put his country first, he should have handed the power over to somebody more ruthless that could get the job done, because he had warning. He had 3 months warning that something was going down in Idlib. He could have shut that down. He didn't have to fire those generals. And yes, the country's poor, and yes, the country's stifled, and yes, it sure could use that oil and grain and everything the United States is stealing from it on top of the sanctions. But if he had his leadership abilities intact and was able to rally his people and rally his troops and identify the danger that was about to approach, instead, what do we get? This. And the denial that I'm seeing is overwhelming. Israel is in Damascus, and yet I'm not hearing anything negative about that. The head of HTS is a Jewish Mossad plant, and yet I'm not hearing anything about that. He's installing Sharia law and will start punishing those that don't follow it. If you're an Alawite woman, you're in trouble. If you're a Christian woman, you're in trouble. They're already stripping the churches. They're looting everything. But they're torturing and killing and raping anyone that had anything left to do with the government. And they're allowing Israel to come in and completely destroy any military facilities in the entire country. Anything. They're being completely stripped, and this so-called HTS leader just stands by and lets it happen. They don't give a damn. Israel is now expropriating all the military hardware, all the weapons, all the troop carriers, whatever, bullets, mortars, everything that was acquired by Syria to fight all those wars, all those years of war against Israel and its proxies, are now being confiscated by Israel with no resistance whatsoever. I don't know who to be more upset with. Assad, the Iraqi people, not Iraqi, the Syrian people in general, the Jews, the CIA, the NSA, the EU. You know, Ursula von der Leyen, the new head of the EU, I think, or whatever the hell she calls herself, she just gave Erdogan a billion euros. And she had just gotten through giving him like 6 billion euros. Now, what did she give him those euros for? For that was his reward for toppling Assad, for letting the Rothschild Khazarian mafia take over the country, for allowing Greater Israel to take place. Thousands and thousands of years. Not since the Mongol horde, I suppose, could you say, has this happened. And here we are. You know, and Turkey, what is Turkey going to give the EU? Nothing. Anyway, I don't know, you guys. Let's see here. We're only 33 minutes of the show, but you realize without Assad, without Syria, Israel, the IDF, their Air Force, F-35s, whatever, they're going to have unrestricted transit over Syria to attack Iran. This is the next big thing. And I suspect that all those weapons that were taken and looted from Syria will find their way into the hands of tomorrow's ISIS. Just like all the weapons that were looted from Muammar Gaddafi when we destroyed Libya, the same way we just got through destroying Syria, all those weapons were shipped into Turkey and given to ISIS and used to carry out all that war that was only stopped when Russia got involved. Only this time around, what was different? Assad's heart was dead because his wife's tits had cancer and her blood had cancer. His life was over. He didn't care anymore. He had no successor, nobody to hand it over to, nobody that could take over and allow him to go back to civilian life like he thinks he's going to do now, trying to be an ophthalmologist in Moscow. How long is that going to last before some angry Chechen or Uyghur or whatever goes in there and kills him, just like they did Kirillov, the general that was just murdered by the Ukrainian FSB in the capital of the country? The guy that basically said that the entire American Western COVID scam was nothing more than biowarfare, and all the labs that we built in Ukraine were nothing more than biowarfare. You know, these are bad things to say. That's a multi-billion, trillion-dollar industry that this bad Russian was coming out and saying there was nothing more than a scheme to commit genocide. Of course, they had to kill him. But what would the United States do if Iran blew up a scooter in Washington, D.C. and took out one of our generals? What would they do? The nukes would come out. You know what they would do. We would go all Pearl Harbor on them. We would go all 9/11 on them. But no, this is in the West. This is democracy. This is justice. This is the American way. But if they do it to us, double standard. Anyway, you know, the Ukrainian thing is almost gone, and this is why all these other things like Syria and what's going on in Iran and what the U.S. wants to do are so important. I will say this, though, just to kind of put this in a proper light before going any further. And that is that this symbol, this trident symbol that you see on Zelensky and on their flag and everything else over there in Ukraine, is the sigil of Satan. Flat out. In your face. So you have to understand that these entities, these territories that are under the control of these entities and these entities that put them into control are nothing more than a certain, well, let's just call them the Rothschild-Khazarian mafia, hiding behind Ukrainian Chabad and worldwide Chabad Lubavitch. It's not the only mobsters in town, but this is their base of operation. So obviously, everything we're talking about is directly connected to this. Kind of like that cabinet that Trump's going to install, where almost every single one of those guys, like Trump, is beholden to Chabad. Everyone's waiting for this big transition, and yet how could you say there's going to be a transition when the effort to maintain this system is relentless? Anyway, nobody will say anything about it, and the only one that seems to be doing anything about it is, of course, Putin, and everyone wonders, is he the real deal or what? It doesn't matter, because this thing that they refer to as the West, this hegemonistic, monopolar thing that the Russians and most of the global South, etc., global majority are turning against. It's not the West. It's not democracy. It's not an ideal. It is a mafia. It is a structure, political control structure that is under the control of a wicked, evil, satanic mafia that we could use many labels. But it should be really obvious when we see that entire structure devoted to supporting a country that uses the sigil of Satan as their banner. I'll go with St. George any day. Well, again, as the world at large is concerned, starting with Syria, I am concerned, but now I realize that even more so, our words are extremely important, and maybe sometimes our words can hurt people we care about, but at the same time, we have to be true, and we have to be not afraid to say what's true. ISIS is not a myth. Russia did not create ISIS. Pictures of soldiers being executed are not old film. Those truckloads of crying women, they're not being taken home. We're the bad guys, people. That's why we have Occupy the Getty. That sounds treasonous, but I've said it many times. My enemy is the one eating our children under our feet, using our tax dollars to build structures that we cannot penetrate right below us. That's the true enemy. Not some other country trying to retain its sovereign rights thousands of miles away from me. It's not treasonous to want to destroy a system that feeds off of innocent children and literally sucks their blood right out of them. We're not cattle. We're not stupid. And we shouldn't live in fear. We should be able to face our enemies. And sometimes, as I'm practicing right now, it's important to go out of our ways to let our enemies know that we see them as they see us. And they see into our eyes and they see into our hearts and souls and know that we're not afraid and that we will bring upon them their greatest fear, that they should learn to respect that and understand that we are inevitable and our mission is inevitable. And unfortunately, until we get at least a third of the population of the entire world to get on our bandwagon, to support our mission, to become aware of us, until we've reached the 100th monkey, until we've reached that magic critical mass when all humans will realize that this is the narrative. And then we will control the mob. And God willing, we will be able to enlighten and provide guidance to the mob at such a time so that they do not act like bloody savages and they do not do unto our enemies that which they deserve. Now, I understand that it's the fear of the mob and the fear of retribution and the fear of righteous vengeance that may be the thing to cause our enemies to be willing to negotiate and eventually capitulate unconditionally. But they need to understand that our ability to maintain control over the mob and protect them once they've given up will be ultimate. The same way we defeat the demons that control the earth now, that the human powers answer to, the same energy and the same power that we use to destroy those demons, we will also use to keep those humans in check. That's what it is to be a Jedi. Until such a time as humans have evolved to not need persuasion and motivation to do the right thing and to be responsible. It's going to happen, and it has to happen, and it will happen. And if you want to help me make it happen, please join our Occupy the Getty page on Telegram. And if you're a spy like Byrne or one of his hackers that's listening, greetings. When you study, you'll notice that we are strictly a nonviolent operation. We do not allow any sort of talk of sovereign tactics, nor do we talk of any sort of physical violent confrontation. And we certainly have no interest and no desire to promote anything racist of any kind. However, upon exposing what's under the Getty, we will treat the perpetrators as humans that have failed their family but are still cared for, but they will certainly be segregated from society in a humane way. And if that is racist, I don't think so. All right, guys. Again, I needed to rant a little bit, and I know that after a week that it certainly cooled off because obviously I was extremely pissed off when all this stuff happened, and it just got worse. And then I talked to my buddy, and the stuff he told me was straight out ISIS propaganda. Somebody's talking to me right now. Don't talk to me when I'm trying to do a show. All right, guys. Let me say this. It's Christmas. Yeah, it's almost Christmas. But it's been a little bit light, and I know everybody's struggling and things are expensive, but if you can help out with the PayPal, I would appreciate it. And, of course, it's Stephen Kelly 714 at yahoo.com, and you have to say friend or family. But it's, unfortunately, well, my kitty or my war chest is getting a little sparse. It's down to 3 digits. Low 3 digits. scary. For me, that's kind of scary. I know I shouldn't even be saying these things, but here it is. So if you want to help out, please, I appreciate it. And anybody that does help out, thank you in advance. If I don't get back to you and say thank you, I try to, but sometimes it's hard to do. I've got some interviews coming in, and sometimes it's hard to even talk to these people. And of course, the El Dorado issue is really huge right now, and it is expanding. I am kind of going into Placer County with this stuff too, and of course Sacramento County. But our target, of course, Vern, you are our boy still. You're not going to get away with it, dude. Okay, it doesn't matter what you do. And this whole concept, I mean, here, I'll tell you, meme guys, since when does a district attorney also run an IT department and have access to all correspondence and emails carried out in his jurisdiction? That sounds like an incredible violation of privacy and a lack of transparency. At least it doesn't sound right. And it certainly would, at the very least, prejudice every single case that this guy's involved in. Now, I don't know how this could be done, but apparently it's being done, and I'm sure it's being done in other places in even more heinous ways, but this is one of the biggest problems over there in El Dorado County, and this is what's being done by this DA to keep his rule over everybody else because he knows all their dirty secrets. He's got all their emails. He's probably got your selfie pictures, too. That's right, those selfie pictures. Anyway, Vern, I hope you're enjoying mine. You pervert. Okay, guys, thank you for tuning in. And again, I'm sorry about last week. Let me just look. I noticed there's a pretty decent amount of you, but we had a pretty good amount of listeners, and then things happen, and if I miss one show, it seems like it really hurts the well, what do we call that? The kinetic energy. Anyway, let me see. Hi, Wooder. How you doing? Who else? Los Angeles, Brooklyn. Hello. Lots of UK, of course. All right. Thank you guys for tuning in. And I did miss you last week. And like I said, I'm going to do some interviews, and I'm going to do my best to try to be a little more active in the Telegram group. And, of course, if any of you need healing, please let me know. And I did lose a couple people. Andre, I'm going to say shout out to you. You know, lost a guy to cancer here I was working on, and someone else, a woman, one of our listeners, very dear people. And it's always sad, but life is very short. And even myself, I look out there and I think of all the little battles I'm fighting, and I'm thinking, boy, you guys are going to be happy when I'm gone. You're going to be dancing. And I need you guys to help me shatter them before I am completely broken, okay? Anyway, what can I say? Oops. What else I want to tell you? Well, I do need you, of course, to join the Telegram group. That's really important. And also, there's the book. If you want my book and you haven't read it yet, it's probably a really good place to start if you want to know what's going on with this whole Getty mission and stuff. You can get it by emailing me at law17gun@aol.com. That's LAW17GUN at AOL.com. Or join my group and I'll send it to you. It's free, okay? Again, thank you for sticking around, guys. I'll talk to y'all real soon, God willing. And we will get a little more active. And yeah, all you Jedi, you wondering why your stuff's going on. Yes, stuff's going on. All right? Okay, sorry if you thought I'm babbling, but at least I wasn't drinking. And no, you alkies, it's not alcohol. That's your projection on your part. Okay, guys. Love you all, okay? Once again, my name is Stephen Kelly, and this is the Stephen D. Kelly Show, and we are Truth Cat Radio, www.truthcatradio.com, and it's now 6:52, December 19, 2004. Come up with a title for the show, but again, adios, Sean David Morton. Adios to the people that I lost recently. Adios to all the good people of Syria that are suffering because of the wickedness of the so-called West. All right. Plenty of people to be sorry for. Good night. God bless. Adios. And goodbye.